Thank you.
Kérdéseimet Gábor bátyám, Edgár válaszait pedig Benkő Vili barátom fogja fordítani. Kedves Edgár, azt olvastam, hogy nagy élmény volt számodra a holdutazás, de még nagyobb az a spirituális megtapasztalás, amit a földre visszatérés közben éltél át. Elmesélted ezt az Energiamező című könyv írójának. Elmondanád-e most nekünk is?
Yes, I can.
Szívesen.
It was after my work was completed on the moon, and I was able, coming back, to look at outside and see the Earth, the moon, and the sun, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens, because we were rotating to keep thermal balance on the spacecraft. And in seeing that, it was an amazing experience, because from my training in astronomy at Harvard and MIT, I realized that the molecules of my body were manufactured in some ancient generation of stars. Laura Silva said to you in the last hour in her talk, all of a sudden I realized that I was connected to everything, that I was a part of those stars, and it was a joyous, ebullient experience. And I realized that as the first generation of spacefarers, that since humans had asked the question forever, who are we? How did we get here? What is my relationship to all of this? That maybe now, as the first generation of space beings, that we should re-ask that question from a new point of view. Now, this experience continued for 3 days on the way home as we were coming home, and every time I got to look out the window. And this sense of joy and connectedness and wonder at the universe that we're in kept coming back and coming back. And I realized that the story of ourselves as told by our science was incomplete and perhaps flawed. And the story of ourselves as told by our cultural cosmologies, normally rooted in our religion, was archaic and perhaps flawed. And so when I came back to Earth, I started asking these questions about what was this experience. I'd never had this before, and to trying to understand it. And I soon came to realize, with the help of some scholars at a nearby university, that every culture on Earth in their history has had at some point the story of these type of transformative inner experience that happened in space. And of course, that is the basis of our religions, are rooted in some story like this. And unfortunately, most of the time it gets politicized and changed up, and the original message of just love and joy and happiness as a part of being in the universe is lost. So I have used my life since that time to use the tools of science to understand more about our consciousness, more about who we are, what we are, and how to better understand and live a life in this planet that we're on, and as you folks in this audience know, to help bring us together in a more peaceful, loving, kind, productive civilization.
Te hoztad létre a tudatjelenségeket vizsgáló híres intézetet, az Institute of Noetic Sciences-t. Mondanál-e néhány szót az intézetről?
You are the founder of the famous Institute of Noetic Sciences, examining phenomena of the mind. Would you say a few words about this institute, please?
Yes, thank you. The Institute grew out of this very conviction and this search that I just described to you, to find a new way of thinking about ourselves. And because 400 years ago, the philosopher René Descartes came to the conclusion that body, mind, physicality, spirituality were two different realms of reality. Now that served a wonderful purpose of getting the Spanish Inquisition off the backs of the intellectuals of Europe, so that they could disagree with the church without being burned at the stake. But the downside of that Cartesian idea was for 400 years, science has grown and progressed in trying to understand nature, but without any appeal to the notion of what is mind, why are we conscious, and how did all this come to be. And the Institute of Noetic Sciences I organized because of that omission for 400 years on the part of science, and because of the inspiration that came from my experience in space, which is what Laura Silva was talking about essentially in her talk.
A meglepő pszichikus képességek magyarázatát ma sok tudós az úgynevezett kvantum-hologram elmélettel magyarázza, amit Laura Silva is megemlített. Hogyan magyaráznád el ezt az elméletet olyan embernek, aki nem tudós?
Many scientists explain surprising psychic abilities with the so-called quantum hologram theory that Laura Silva has mentioned. How would you explain this theory to someone who is not a scientist?
All right. There are many facets to what we call a quantum hologram, and I will start with the simplest one. Max Planck, at the end of the 19th century, discovered that all matter emits photons continuously and absorbs photons from nature. This is true even down to 0 degrees Kelvin, which is absolute zero. That came the notion of the zero-point energy field. And so we know that even at 0 degrees Kelvin, matter emits and absorbs information from its surroundings. And in 1994, a colleague of mine in Germany discovered the fact that these emissions from every body, you, me, this, that, everything, is coherent. It carries coherent information about the object. And that is one of the basic definitions of a quantum hologram. It's a non-local structure that carries information. And for those of you familiar with some of the older mystical language, the so-called Akashic record, which is the history of matter, here is the mechanism by which that takes place. And in addition to that property, there is the property of matter, protons, particles, antiparticles, popping in and out of existence in deep space. And that is the source, basic source, energy source of matter. And so that is another property of the quantum, of the zero-point energy field, which produces the quantum hologram and produces the matter that eventually becomes star systems. So here we have described two fundamental properties of nature that we're just now really starting to understand in a bit of way, is the energy that creates everything in the zero-point energy field and the information that is recorded from all experience in the zero-point energy field. And these are two major properties that are coming out to be understood in our modern time.
A kvantum hologram elmélet igazolja, hogy a víz információt képes tárolni. Ma délfelé sor kerül ünnepi meditációnkra, amelynek során a bolygón több millióan programozzuk jobb jövőnket, mentálisan a vízre hatva. Mondanál-e valamit a víz mentális programozhatóságával kapcsolatban?
Quantum holography explains also why water can store information. Today, noon, we'll meditate together with millions of people for a better future by mentally affecting water. Would you comment on the topic of mentally influencing water?
Yes, it is clear, and certainly the science of homeopathy is rooted in this very phenomenon, that when we provide information and we meditate on some objects, like water in this case, that let's take it to a more physical level firstly. When you put a contaminating substance in water, it has been discovered and known that you can take all the molecular structure of that contaminant out of the water to purify it, but there's still an informational substance that remains. And that is the basis of a quantum hologram in the water. And there is no reason why, by putting a mental projection of putting something in that water, you can do the same thing. I'll add one more point, that a French scientist by the name of Jacques Benveniste discovered this phenomena quite a few years ago, and the scientific community firmly rejected that idea. But now we understand a mechanism, this mechanism, the quantum holographic mechanism, which showed that he was correct and valid in his first discovery of that.
Ez egyébként az Energiamező című könyvben részletesen benne van. Edgar, találkoztál José Silvával és tibeti szerzetesekkel. Milyen élményeket szereztél találkozások kapcsán?
You've personally met Jose Silva and also a few Tibetan monks. What experiences did you get through these meetings?
Well, certainly, Jose Silva was one of the early people I met since I was in Texas and he was in Texas, and at that point in time, and I was interested in these things, and we did get to meet and talk briefly. And one of the things I was interested in at that point in time was the work of Dr. Joseph Ryan at Duke University on these very things that we're talking about, parapsychological phenomena. And so here I thought were two great men, one being a pioneer in the science of parapsychology, and the other one being a pioneer in the practice of mind control and mind conditioning, and they ought to talk to each other. And so I tried to get them to come together, and I'm sorry, as I told Laura last evening in our discussion, it didn't work very well. These two didn't get along hardly well at all. Here we are at this 35, almost 40 years later, but we're still doing the same things. So we're researching, finding new ground and new discovery and new ways of expressing things and new ways of helping people to utilize their minds and to get clear. And so the two go together in spite of the fact that two very great men of yesteryear didn't get along very well together. You ask about a Tibetan monk. Yes, a Tibetan monk by the name of Norbu Chen was one of my early contacts at that point in history. And I was lecturing at a conference on parapsychology. And this might go down.
It's all right. Go ahead, sir.
And this monk purported to be a healer. And my mother joined me at this conference because we hadn't seen each other. And my mother happened to have glaucoma very badly. And her eyesight was, to use the scale, 2200 without glasses. In other words, she was legally blind. And so I thought maybe this healer could help her. And I got them together in my room that evening. And yes, with a 20-minute meditation and him passing his hands over her head, after 20 minutes, he said, go to your room, treat yourself as though you've had major surgery, have some grape juice and broth, and let's see what tomorrow brings. The next morning, my mother came knocking on my door in my bedroom. Wake up, son, wake up, please. Praise the Lord, I can see. And she had her Bible in her one hand. My mother was a very devout Christian. She had her Bible in one hand, her glasses in the other, and reading from her Bible without her glasses, praise the Lord, I can see. Then she proceeded to drop her glasses on the floor, ground them under her heel, praise the Lord, I can see. And then proceeded to drive home that day 200 miles without glasses, legally blind. That convinced me that healing can take place. However, the next part of the story is very interesting too. I talked to my mother every day for the next week. And every day, how is it, Mother? How's your eyes? Can you see? Yes, praise the Lord, I can see. However, the following week, after 1 week, Mother called me on the phone. And I could tell as soon as the tone of her voice something was wrong. And I said, Mother, what's the matter? And she said, son, is Norbu Chen a Christian? No, Mother. No, Mother. He's a Buddhist, but he's a very good man. Oh, I've been healed by Satan. Mother had to go get new glasses immediately. Here's the important start of the story. My mother lived another 10 years after that. And as time progressed, even though she had to get her thick Coke bottle glasses back initially, before she passed away 10 years later, her glasses had been reduced and reduced and reduced, so they were her simple reading glasses that you could buy at any pharmacy. What is the lesson? Belief system. What you believe will happen to you. If you believe it hard enough, you can make it work. My mother was healed. Suddenly she didn't believe because the healer was not of her faith. And so she lost her healing. But she was a very, very bright, intelligent woman. And she realized if she could get it, lose it, she could get it back, which she did. So naturally, my work for the last 30 years since that period, 35 years since that period, has been to use the tools of science to help understand these type of phenomena of the role of mind, what we can do with it, learn to better train ourselves the way you folks have learned to train yourselves, and use the tools of science to understand this in a better way.
Azt olvastam, hogy néhány éve távolról gyógyítottak meg téged veserákból. Elmesélnéd-e ennek történetét?
I read that a few years ago you've been successfully cured from kidney cancer from distance. Would you tell us the story of this healing?
Yes, I'll be glad to. I'll be glad to. Actually, I've had two healings. One was closer to a hands-on healing, and then the kidney cancer from a distance. But both of them were using the same type of techniques. The kidney cancer was actually one that was diagnosed with an MRI, and the MRI demonstrated abnormalities in the kidney. That technician was certain appeared the same as a kidney cancer. I did not have a biopsy made of this particular one, however, get in touch with the young healer that I was working with and mentoring at that point on quantum holography. He was a very gifted healer, very much like Norbu Chen, but he was a young man. And I asked him to take a look and see what he could see. I did not tell him what was the problem. Just asked him to take a look at my kidney. And he did that evening. I was in Florida in the United States. He was in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. He says, he told me the next day after he'd looked at it that evening, he said, yes, I think it has the appearance of what I see cancer, it has the appearance of being cancerous. I said, well, you help me with it. That was in December of 1992. I'm sorry, that date is incorrect. That was in December of 2002. In January of 2003, I went to a radiologist in New York that had a very high definition Doppler sonogram and an MRI. And we made a reading of this area. And I took the previous reading with me to show the earlier readings and to what we were getting now. And the radiologist said, yes, you're improved. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So we did, and in June of that year, 5 months later after this, I went back again and had another set of sonograms and MRIs made, and they were shown to be totally clear. The other instance was I experiment with these healing modalities continuously. The other one that I had was a bit earlier than this. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer and did have a biopsy made. And my board of directors at my Institute of Noetic Sciences, many of whom, or some of whom, had been through a mystery school and learned the healing techniques, laying on of hand techniques. And at a board meeting, they asked me if they could be of help. And I said, well, of course, I'll take all the help I can get from my friends. So at that board meeting, a group of them, in the presence of about 50 observers, including scientists, did much the same thing that Norbu Chen did with my mother, moving their hands around in the aura of my body. And I will have to admit that while this was going on, I was feeling very light and happy and kind of out of it, unbalanced at the moment. This was on a Saturday night. By the following Thursday, I felt back together and grounded again. I went back to my radiologist who had done the sonogram and the MRI, and he repeated the test on the prostate and said, it's totally clear, it's gone at this point. I'm convinced, as a final thought on this, I'm convinced that I gave myself these maladies in order to prove that we could get past them in this way.
Good.
Thank you.
Ezeket a gyógyulásokat szintén meg tudod magadnak magyarázni a kvantumhologram elmélettel?
Can you explain these healings, these experiences with the quantum hologram theory?
Perhaps it would be a tentative theory to explain this. The basic definition of the quantum hologram is a non-local information structure. Now, when we do a healing or when we do any sort of mental activity that wants a result, that's an intention. We create an intention. And I'm convinced that at least a part of the solution, number one, the projection of an energy and a healing thought from the healer to the patient is a powerful, positive modality. I have worked with many healers and very powerful ones, and when they project energy and healing toward a person, there is a vibration that's important here. It's an information being projected, and of course, it helps correct the information of illness in the body so that the immune system can then take over and help and assist in the healing. So we generally have two effects working together, or we could have two effects. We have the energy of the healing person being projected and the information for the healing being projected that helps allow the person's own body immune system to correct itself. And it's this second part, this is where the belief system comes in. You have to be able and want to believe in the process. If the person being healed doesn't accept the idea, then nothing can happen. Or if it does happen, in spite of the person's belief, it is rather certain they will get the malady again, over again, after the effect has dissipated. We still have a lot of work to do before we really can understand this, all the details of these phenomena. They're very important. To me, it's the most powerful aspect of the study, is how do we heal ourselves with energy and with this information in this way. And certainly I'm only giving a very brief sketch because I don't really know the deep answers yet.
Végül megkérdezlek, hogy mind dolgozol most?
Finally, let me ask you, what is the most important project that you are working on these days?
Okay. I have just described one of them, this healing, understanding this healing property. But what has come out, you folks, thanks to Laura, are very interested in quantum holography. Some of the most interesting work that has come out of quantum holography is the mathematics that goes into it. And I won't even begin to start talking mathematics here, but rest assured that the mathematics that comes out of what is called nilpotent quantum, rather Lie group nilpotent algebra. It's a structure in mathematics that is very important to understanding the quantum hologram. And it's opening entirely new doors for us in biology, in cosmology, in virtually all of the sciences where we can bring a quantum dimension to it. And it has, well, I don't know what really more to say, except the fact that it's exciting, It's new. It's a new vista onto nature and to the way our bodies work. There is no question. Well, let me first say that for 80 years since the discovery of quantum mechanics, scientists have said it only pertained to subatomic matter. And we now know that is totally wrong. And so what it's allowing us to do, we're moving these effects of quantum entanglement, which is really what Laura was talking about, is that everything is entangled. That's why we're all a part of the same thing. There's a quantum entanglement here and information exchange that takes place. Like the icon on your computer, you click on an icon and it pulls up a program. Go ahead. And when in your mind you create an image of something that is you're entangled with, like your lover or your child or your parents or whomever, you hold that person in mind, that makes a connection, a quantum connection to that person. And we're starting to see as we develop and understand this further, that this system of entanglement, well, one way to say it most simply, in English at least, I don't know about in your language, in English we say our intuition is our sixth sense. But no, it should be our first sense. Because our intuition is a quantum property of nature, and quantum entanglement was around as an information mechanism long before our solar system and we were. So it should be the first information structure. So using this, it's a whole new door into science that's just now being opened, and I don't really know where it's all going to go, but it's exciting.
Thank you for being part of this door opening, and thank you for coming to Budapest and making our festival very special.
Thank you.
Nagyon köszönöm, hogy része ennek az ajtónyitásnak, és hogy jelenlétével megemelte ennek a fesztiválnak a szintjét. God bless you. Thank you so much.